Good day, CET 116 students. I'm coming to you today live from my Zoom feed to chat with you a little bit today about how to start and plan a subdivision. As many of you know, our plans have changed a little bit and we're unable to meet traditional like we would like to. So therefore this video is made to supplement and augment the process. Also help you learn a little bit about how to plan a process using a standard set of subdivision regulations from a municipal government. I will today be using a few pieces of information to share with you, and I'll be flipping back and forth through them. I'm going to be using a set of PowerPoint slides that I've put together, as well as I do have a set of subdivision regulations that we will toggle back and forth through. I'm going to start today by pulling up the subdivision regulations and getting my planning tool set together. The subdivision regulation guide that you're seeing here is one that I've put together using PowerPoint. This will be available for you on Blackboard. Today, what I want to do is start to tell you a little bit about how we would preliminarily plan for a full set of subdivision documents. Now, one of the reasons I believe this is an important part of the CET 116 class is that most civil engineers will encounter this sort of type of situation of the creation of a subdivision as part of their day-to-day routine. And sometimes it's important for us to back sort of look at what sort of guidelines set up the parameters for a subdivision. So today, what I'm going to do is take you quickly through those particular parameters or guidelines. Since we are not going to be completing our subdivision this semester as planned, these slides will actually just give you an idea on how the process would have taken place. Okay, I'm going to begin by talking to you a little bit about the planning process itself. First of all, what is a subdivision? The subdivision, the guidelines that you see here, and the ones that I'll be using are from the Pueblo County Subdivision Regulations. And basically, what that means is that the county of Pueblo, Colorado, has said that if someone wants to subdivide a parcel under the criterion of a subdivision, there are different state statutes that define what is a subdivision as far as the size of the surface area. In this particular, or the size of the surface area of the lot that you're going to be making. This subdivision is a subdivision that's less than 35 acres. So therefore it has a different set of criterion within the state of Colorado and within the county of Pueblo. Okay, so the definition you see on the left under Title 16, by the way, this is found in Title 16 of the Pueblo County Subdivision Regulations. And you could find them by looking that up. On the left-hand side is the definition of what they're calling a subdivision. For our purpose, it's simply going to be taking a larger piece of property right now and cutting it up into smaller pieces of property and create all of the city and county governed regulations. I have to take that back, not just city, but not city, but in this situation, county. There could be regulations that are with different cities and different municipal agencies in addition to the regulations you see here. Basically, the regulations that you see here are really created by the county, and basically they've been given the jurisdiction to regulate subdivisions within their county from basically first the federal government, who gives the rights as we studied earlier in the semester, we talked about the federal laws, and that would have been the federal guidelines for surveying in the United States. And then they are then given to the state to regulate. The state is regulating them. The state has given those powers to the county government to regulate. And the county has decided they would be the governing agency within this. And then those controls go to them with their set of guidelines. Now, the city government can choose to make a set of guidelines themselves. I'm calling them in these slides the lower level of government, but the city can choose to make their own set of regulations. That does mean that you still have to comply to the federal, the state, the county, and the city regulations. Then there could be some certain special district regulations, or even regulations set out by some particular entity that would have some rights in this subdivision. So why these subdivision regulations, and why such tight scrutiny? Well, really, anytime we see laws or creation of rules and regulations within a municipality, they really are about protecting the citizenry, and in this situation, to protect the Colorado citizen, so that when they purchase something like this, they do in fact get everything they would need to be able to live on that piece of property and live within that county. So therefore, it actually is a fail-safe to protect the citizens, so that when they do purchase these lots, they do have the adequate buildable the adequate buildable criterion that you could use to build on this particular lots. So now I'm going to head to the next slide. The next slide is to tell us a little bit about how a set of subdivision regulation, or a subdivision, would come to fruition here. So the basically, I'm going to talk about the process to subdivide, some of the requirements to ensure the quality and safety. Then we'll talk a little bit about the design standards, a little bit about the utility and improvement standards, and a little bit about the legal aspects for conveyance of title. The first one is about the process of subdivision. Well, first, what you would do in looking at your parcel is you would look at what sort of are the requirements for the subdivision. Over to the right-hand side of what I've done is I've copied out of Title 16 basically the table of contents. The table of contents will explain the things that it would be the developer's responsibility to actually turn into the municipal government for approval. The surveyor and the professional engineer, professional surveyor play a role in possibly the preparation of these documents, possibly the preparation of all the documents. But really is the developer's responsibility. The developer will then contact the professional to follow through with the satisfaction of these requirements. Our particular area would be looking at what we would do in the preliminary process. So the first one that we're going to talk about is the sketch plan and how you would submit a sketch plan. That's up here in section 1604, 16.04, 16.08 here. And then if you'll notice farther down here, it talks about how you would submit them, and then actually how you would go on to present that piece of it. Normally the process does take several steps, and it's quite a tedious process. The first process would be to submit a sketch plan, propose your plan to the municipal government, in this situation, the county government. The county would then look at that, say whether or not it met the criteria. If you look right here, the sketch plan requirements, that would be what has to be on the set of plan requirements to even get it heard by the municipal government. Once the municipal government would give you approval for the preliminary or for the sketch plan, well, then they would give you permission to say, okay, it's time to proceed on to the next process. The next process would be the preliminary plan, and then the final process being the process in which we would actually create the final actual document for conveyance of title. So here are the requirements. I have submitted for you guys the Title 16 subdivision regulations, which are part of the Blackboard information, and you can pull that down directly from the information, the course information inside Blackboard. Okay, so for our example, we'll talk about in section 16.08, the subdivision or the sketch plan. The sketch plan, for the submission of the sketch plan, there's certain criteria. And then we would go on to the sketch plan requirements, and then we would go on to the procedures for submission of that sketch plan so that the board of county government could decide whether or not to let this subdivision become part of their county inventory, shall we say, of lots. Okay, so this is our parcel of ground that we would be looking at that I had given you guys as a part of the project. Basically what we have is we have about approximately 80-acre parcel. I think it's 78 acres and some odd change here, bounded on the west and the south side by a roadway and bounded by vacant land on the north and east side. The next part in the design, in the process, once you've submitted the preliminary plan, or I'm sorry, the sketch plan for approval with the county government. Now the sketch plan was just and you would look up the criteria and what it would be, but it basically tells you generally how they're going to use the space, the spatial relationships, and how you're going to use the roadways. The next one would be the preliminary plan. The preliminary plan, once you've gotten approval from the county government, you would be given the rights to go ahead and go to the next phase. The preliminary plan is one that I like to use the term engineering requirements. It really is where the requirements, the engineer designs the particular rules for the creation of this subdivision, and it would tell the builder how to create the subdivision and within what sort of standards or guidelines we do. This, I like to use the term the engineering properties. By that I mean this would be where you would define roadways, the type of roadways, the widths of the roadways, the thicknesses of the asphalt, for example, if asphalt was a requirement, all the utility connections, how they would be made, how deep they would be, what sort of utility piping would be required, what sort of utilities would go in there and where they would exist within the properties. In addition to this, you would also submit what sort of structures would be on, what sort of structures would be allowed, and you put these all of this design criteria in so that you could say, this is how we're going to do that. Now, those preliminary plan requirements are strictly governed in these in these county standards, and it would tell you what exactly they would do. They must be done by a professional engineer so that a professional engineer does oversee the quality and ensure that the quality of these construction documents are within the standards that the county government has put forward here. Oftentimes county governments will actually adopt something even larger, maybe some national codes and standards in addition to this that would supplement these preliminary plan requirements. Our process would be to submit those. This is where we would do things like defining your stationing of your roadways, defining your plan and profile, and things like that. Our process to do your subdivision that I've actually asked each of you to do would be to create a plan and profile of your main streets, a plan view and a profile view of your main streets, showing us how you would do both the final and what is there in the existing, and then how you would actually create the final drawing on top of that, so you would know how the ground looks right now, and how it's going to be after the roadway is built. The next one, which is the final plat, is the legal requirements. So I like to say the preliminary plans are the engineering requirements. The final plat is the legal requirements. The final plat, what's really important about the final plat is that the final plat is the plat that actually gets made public record, and the conveyance of title, the sales of the parcels, are directly related to that particular document. So for example, if we were going to sell off lot 3 of block 5 of a particular subdivision, the legal requirements for what that actually means would be this document would be the one that's filed in the normally in the county seat, in the county clerk and recorder's office, and that would be where this final document would exist. This one would have to have all the authorized signatures of both the owner, the developer, and the county, particular county officials at that time. This is the only document that actually becomes public record. Now, the engineering requirements or the preliminary plans, those are all filed normally in the municipal government's office. For example, you might find the preliminary plans filed in the engineering office or the records of the county engineer or someone like that, where those would all be filed there. And that's how you would keep and maintain the quality of the subdivision, because there would be an authority, someone of authority, which would be overseeing the submittal of those documents. This is a very important piece in that this is how legal title would take place to the parcel as it went on into the future, and how the bigger parcel now becomes smaller parcels and conveyed off. Also, you will find in those sets that set of city, or I'm sorry, county specifications, you will see some design standards. I just pulled a few of them out there. If you look from, you look actually in the actual documents, you'll see that the list goes on. It's way beyond what you see here. But I did want to tell you, these are the sort of things that you would find in the design standards. Now, these are what I like to say are the minimum design standards for things such as streets, sidewalks, curb and gutter, block standards, easements, driveways, sanitary sewage disposal systems, etc. These are, as I said, minimum, and these are the minimum ones because they're put out by the county government. The engineer can choose to make them stricter. Now, also be careful if you're in a city subdivision. The city may have standards that actually exceed, they must at least meet these. The city government can actually exceed these if they choose. So this just goes to show you a little bit about that. So you could go into that document and actually look up those standards. And so as a design engineer, you would say, I need to know what at least the standards or the minimum standards are. And then we would discuss with our client, the developer and the owner, what we want to do, possibly to do something beyond those minimums. I have included inside your Blackboard course information a set of these regulations for you to actually look and use in the process of creating your subdivision. I hope this has been a set of slides that would help you understand at least a little bit the process. Obviously, you would get better as you do these, and many civil engineers who specialize in this area become very good at these, and they actually know what is expected. There are also some things that are very important about the subdivision regulations in the language that is expected, as well as the certain formatting and any sort of signatures and things like that that are required would be found on these documents. So I encourage you, if you are in the process of developing a parcel of ground, either under as an owner's representative, a developer's representative, or you happen to work for an engineering surveying firm in this process, that you understand these documents and understand how to use them to set up the stage for how you would actually create your subdivision. Thank you, and we will head on to another set of slides here in the future. Thank you, Professor Minsick, coming to you from my Zoom feed. As much as I wish that beautiful beach behind me was where I was at, that is not true. I'm coming to you live from my home in Pueblo, Colorado. Thanks, have a good day, and we'll talk to you soon.